have the same practices over and over and over, but all they are meant for control of the corresponding secret society and the overall organization into which this society is embedded. Let's come back to basically the education in schools and how the New World Order is preparing to bring down these practices into the public educational system. I mean, your upcoming book, Eustace, is fascinating to this, and that's probably one of the most interesting books to hit the American book market in many years.
Well, I think so. And you see, supposedly they're bringing all these practices into the schools to be taught to the children under the guise of sex education. In other words, why shouldn't a child know the difference between male and female and what the roles of the two sexes are? But in fact, the educational system is doing exactly the opposite. They're ignoring the traditional roles of male and female to our children, and I'm talking about 6-year-olds, 6 to 8 years old, are being asked to not only be tolerant of sexual deviation, but that even at that age, they really should start thinking very seriously about whether they want to be a normal person or whether they want to be a sexual deviate themselves. In other words, they're being challenged to accept homosexuality when they're 6 years old, and this is not a primary concern of the average 6 years old.
Absolutely, and especially keeping in mind that homosexuality is not 10% of the population, as is the myth, but it's
very small.
A lot less.
So what they're actually doing also is to, because homosexuals don't reproduce, they have to constantly be recruiting new members, or otherwise the practice could die out altogether.
But that's fascinating, because that's another population reduction policy out of the large number of such policies that they have. From the designer diseases and designer viruses that are coming non-stop from their assembly line of the labs at Fort Detrick and many other places, to the encouragement of working for both parents so that they cannot make that they cannot produce 6 or a dozen children as the American family would do just maybe 50 years earlier, but just 1 or 2 children. Encouragement of lesbianism and homosexuality to reduce the population.
Yes, very much so.
I mean, the kid of my friends was asked in high school a long questionnaire about homosexuality, and the bottom line of it was that if they had any problem figuring out on which side of the divider line they were, they should go and talk to their homosexual teacher about getting enlightenment. And the very end of the questionnaire was basically that you should not discuss these things with your parents.
Oh yes, very much so.
Which enraged the parents themselves.
Well, the parents, you see, hope that their children will be normal and that they will marry and have children themselves, so they'll have grandchildren. But you see, the homosexual recruitment cuts that off. Not only population reduction, also the breakdown of the family, which is a very important part of behaviorism.
So, still I've been thinking, I mean, it's so fascinating to put under a common denominator the stories around Michael Jackson, the stories about the Menendez brothers, with a recent story that I heard from some friends about very interesting summer camps, that a weekend of 2 days in this summer camp for kids may cost up to $25,000. And what do the elite children get in such a camp? That costs a fortune for almost a yearly, the median yearly income for an American family of 4 was $22,000 just about 5 years ago. Now it may be $25,000. So basically a median yearly income goes into a 2-day education. I was told that these are camps where the kids of the overly ambitious parents would be taught at an early age to acquire a split personality. They would get a 6 to 10-year-old child and immerse the child in an underground pit, naked. The child is totally naked, underground pit full of beetles, non-venomous beetles and insects, large beetles, but so frightful to the kid that basically the kids go in hyperspace. They immediately get out of the body, and this is the point in time where certain demonic entities, certain spirits, enter into them, forming this split personality. Do you have any comments on such practices?
Well, the bring about of MPD, the multiple personality disorder, in children, I think is a very important part of the educational system today, and the homosexual practices are an important part of inculcating MPD in a child because, you see, psychologists know that for a normal, healthy child, there is a period of sexual latency from the age of 6 to about 16 where you do not have overt sexual activity with anyone else, particularly with adults. And that when this happens, you actually sort of burst the child's cocoon, the protective cocoon, in which its personality is developing. In other words, you penetrate that, and that's why it's called penetration. And once that is penetrated, you open the way for the child to develop multiple personalities and to become a much easier and more controllable subject of the world order state. And there's no question that this is a definite political program that they're following, that the sex education in the schools is dedicated to this, not only to the breakdown of the family, but to producing an almost new class of robot-like citizens who will grow up never to question authority, never to rebel, because you see...
As much as a child in a satanic cult would question authority, as much they would question authority.
And so this is definitely part of the program to create what they call a new citizen, a new type of citizen who will never really represent a threat to the new order.
Fascinating stories. Basically, I wouldn't be amazed that split personality in satanic cults is not a byproduct of the activity of the satanic cults. It may be the prime objective of these cults to create new upcoming members, the new generation, from whose ranks the future elite members, the future basically leaders of this demonocracy, of this society under extremely heavy Luciferian influence would be chosen. And I mean, stories coming from the secret underground laboratories and projects that have sprung by the hundreds, maybe even by the thousands all over the country. Basically, split personalities created in the employees there. An engineer will have two personalities. So personality A works in the above ground, not so secretive project from 9 to 1, let's say. Then they switch to personality B. He takes the elevator downstairs and goes into the super secret underground establishment. When the time comes for him to leave, he switches back to personality A. So he never even realizes that 4 hours of his day are missing and that he would spend them somewhere else. Somebody was joking that, well, I'm sure he won't be getting 2 paychecks, but he will be getting 2 tax returns at the end of the year.
Well, you know, Vladimir, this all brings us to a very important point also, that what we are seeing is a complete change in the ultimate goals of the educational system. Now, before, in the United States, which we had, say, up till 1945, the educational system was supposed to bring out the individual personality of the child, to prepare him for leadership, for a creative life. But today, the educational system has abandoned that goal entirely, and its sole purpose is to produce conformists.
Faceless robots.
Faceless robots. And of course, the split personality is part of achieving this, and the homosexual practices is part of this. And So we are actually have seen a tremendous makeover of the educational system, and I think I'm the first person to point this out. That is, over the overall picture. I mean, people have been focusing on individual aspects of this and becoming alarmed about it all over the United States in recent years. That's one reason you've got the homeschooling development, and you've got other reactions.
Private Christian schools and so on.
Private Christian schools, because the parents realize something very bad is happening to their children, and they're trying to save them. But until they see the whole picture, they cannot do much to correct the situation.
Absolutely. And what I see, the bottom line is a slow, general moving away from the Christian principles and morals into the Luciferian, Lucifero-satanic principles and morals.
Oh, it is Luciferian, no question about it.
Well, something that you mentioned, Eustace, I think is very important when you talked about how the concept of a new man or a new person being developed.
Well, that was also the communist goal, to produce a new man.
That's exactly right,
yes.
the new man.
Yeah.
And I was at Santa Barbara, University of California, Santa Barbara.
Center for Humanistic Studies, probably.
Well, no, I was up there for about a week going through all of the documents on mind control that was being used by the communists at the time, reference works, but there was one article there in the California State document on how the terms that were being used and developed for the new citizen that will inhabit the New World Order. And they kept referring to the young people as the new man, the new creature, the new individual, and the new society. And the whole emphasis is that you must get away from the human feelings, human emotions, the desire for love and to
warmth
care for
and happiness
warmth.
and togetherness.
Right, and get away from that. You must have what is called the new man.
Yes.
And they even brought out in the article how names have even been developed in the past 100 years, like New Man, as a name, like Paul Newman.
Oh yes. Paul.
And New Man, and they have been developing names purposely
To introduce the concept.
Yeah, right.
Fascinating stuff, fascinating stuff.
I still have those documents that I photocopied
The film
years ago.
Boys from Brazil is a beautiful film about these secret, here we are entering into genetic research, into human genetic research, into cloning of human beings. In the film Boys from Brazil, these were biological clones that were cloned from...
But that's not a new concept. As far back as the 40s, what's his name, Charles Lawton, was starred in a movie called Island of Lost Souls. Then in the 70s, late 60s, early 70s, Burt Lancaster played in a movie called Island of Dr. Moreau.
Yes.
There have been...
which is a book based on a book by H.G. Wells, which came out in the 1890s, early 1900s, which was, I mean, that's probably would be another fascinating interview about the human genetic research that has been going on. But all of these indoctrination methods, for example, what they bring out is, what was the name of this Vulcan member of the Star Trek 1, the old Star Trek? What was the name of this alien Vulcan?
Oh, you're talking about Mr. Spock.
Yeah, Mr. Spock, yeah, Mr. Spock. Why is, in what way is Mr. Spock different from the human beings? In the way that he has no emotions.
And only pure logic.
Only pure logic. Basically, he is as logical as a computer and as emotional as a brick.
Exactly.
And this is exactly the new men, the brave new boys of the New Republic that H.G. Wells wrote about. Actually, it's a fascinating quote in his 1902 treatise of basic impacts of science on society and social progress.
And who was it? Was it Aldous Huxley that wrote Brave New World?
Exactly.
In which he talked about how young people were going to be traumatized and prepared to go into a new order of the world,
Exactly.
in which there would be no more human emotions, no more family ties, nothing to do with anything, because when you're dealing with human emotions and human feelings, for a child, for other people, it is very difficult to control that kind of a mentality.
Not only that, but human emotions. What is the strongest of all human emotions?
It's love.
Love. And basically, if you can bottom line the whole Christian message, the whole message of Jesus Christ during his life on the planet, it can be bottom line with one single word: love. So basically, the word love is like anathema to the empire of fallen angels, and they would like to do everything possible to get our society as further away from the condition of love as they can. So Mr. Spock is the excellent individual. So in these programs, there is a, well, not a very young boy by now, but a young gentleman that was educated in these boys from Brazil type of New World Order secret academy somewhere in the Brazilian jungles, Jefferson Souza, who is an extremely, or Sosa, Jefferson Sosa, who is an extremely strong psychic, according to Albilic. He was able to even pinpoint and trace his multiple goings back and forth in time, and his implantation of his soul into the new baby, which are other bizarre technologies, not of genetic human engineering, but of soul engineering, which we would probably discuss in a further future film. But this strong psychic boy had a very interesting childhood. He was raised in a farm totally void of any and every human contact, living in an isolated room where food would be brought on a tray through the input window, and the output would be taken out through the toilet or the output window, and that's it. No human control of any kind, no sound, no nothing. And the only contact with the outside world would be through television screens. So basically these are boys educated by machines. And the purpose of this program is to get rid of the emotions, to get rid of that most dreadful of the human conditions, the condition of love.
And in relation to that, the movies back in the 40s, the Tarzan movies, if you remember, the article I was telling you about in Santa Barbara brought out how the motion pictures of Tarzan movies was to glorify the glorified savage, to take man and the entire human race and go back to the jungle and to live like the what they called the glorified savage, and that the modern day civilization based on Christianity was to be shunned, and that the
abolished,
was to go back to the jungle, to live like Tarzan.
Well, that was Rousseau's Noble Savage, you know.
Yeah, the Noble Savage.
Back to nature.
Back to nature, which was a very important philosophical concept, and which I think immediately preceded the French Revolution.
And basically, I wouldn't be amazed that Rousseau was a major luminary and a major thinker of the Illuminati.
Well, that's what the actual records say, that he was an ideologue, a major ideologue.
As was Plato.
As was Plato.
I mean, through his major work, The Republic, which basically laid the foundation from all future political developments on the planet away from monarchism and into republicanism, which is the Luciferian way of social management, unlike monarchism, which is the Trinitarian way of social management.
You see, the most important thing you need to remember in relation to mind control is the one thing that the people who are running this world from behind the scenes, the one thing that they are most concerned about and that frightens them is human individuality and human creativity, the human being as it was designed by God to be free and to exercise all of the human emotions, to protect oneself and one's family, and to look after the human race as a whole. This is the one thing the conspiracy cannot deal with, and they want to do away with, is anything that has to do with human emotions or human family, and mechanize the human race in order that we shall all be able to operate together as a machine in the new world order without any human emotions, so that if someone is taken out one night and dealt with by the government, that everyone will just go to work the next morning and just do what they're told. And I think that this thing that happened in Waco, Texas is a classic example of how well we have been prepared, because we sat in television and watched human beings in our country, in America, die in front of our eyes, and it was not a movie. This was actual life and death situation. And then everyone got up the next morning and went to work, and
nobody said nothing.
No one said much about it.
They were an ugly cult engaging in child abuse.
And never even considered that they were, no matter what religion they were human beings in America that died in front of you, and no one did anything.
I hit upon a very interesting book, a book called I Am Lucifer. At the introduction to that book, the author claims that he was traveling on a train in Italy one day, fell asleep, and suddenly Comrade Lucifer started talking to him, and basically gave him some, not memoirs, but condensed version of his viewpoint of history of the last 2,000-3,000 years. And in several occasions in that book, there were very interesting passages where it was said that Lucifer, I mean, a narration coming from Comrade Lucifer himself, in saying that, well, I cannot understand it, this human emotion of love, and I cannot stand it, and basically I'm getting the goosebumps from it. Such a revulsion, such a negative attitude, and at the same time you feel that this is a steely mind, a steely heart, without any emotion, without any compassion, without any warmth. So it's very interesting in the yin and yang universe of competing and parallelly existing opposite beginnings, how the infinite love of Christ is confronted with the infinite coldness and steeliness of Comrade Lucifer, and how this bottom line, I mean, there is a tremendous effort, what tremendous effort there exists to introduce this bottom line of lack of compassion and love into the public education.
In relation to the subject we're talking about, there was a movie. I would suggest everyone get a copy, to rent a copy of the movie and watch it. It's called Network. It's about 15 years old, and it was called Network. And in it, the head of the network, the president or chairman of the board, talks with the offending newscaster, and in it is probably one of the most concise discussions of the Illuminati's plans for the world that I've ever seen in a movie. It's just incredible. Where the head of the network tells him, the newscaster, that we have been planning this new order, this new world that's coming, where men will be automatrons, there'll be robots, there will be no more troubles like we have here with individuality and personalities. All human creatures will be working for one goal, the goal of the new order, and it's just a fascinating explanation for what these people have in mind for the world. I'd suggest highly that you get the movie Network and watch those scenes in it. And incidentally, in that movie, also at the very end of the movie, the newscaster says to the audience on television, he said, well, don't worry about America being destroyed, because we are the goose that lays the golden egg. So we're going to be here because we have to be here to feed everyone. And he says, so you're not going to see the end of America, you're not going to see the end of the world, but what you are going to see is the end of individuality, human creativity, and the individual human being. That's what you're going to see the end of. That's what we have now. No longer will there be the individual creative personality. We're all going to live in a new order, in a new world, where there will be no more individuality, no more human emotions at all.
You will be amazed in how many science fiction stories or films the idea about implantation of microchips in the mind of a person so as to obtain a total control so as basically that every step would be known to the elite, every word said, and when they decide to pull the master switch, then you would become an obedient performer of their orders and their agenda. I mean, these are not just science fictional ideas coming in the mind of authors, but these are scenarios and agendas that have been played out and that have been developed by hired luminaries in the scientific field in the very same way that, let's say, the report of the Iron Mountain was generated, hiring with unlimited budget for 3 years Nobel laureates and the best of the best in 20 different academic fields. There are stories, rumors that basically what Orwell wrote in his book 1984 was not a prophetic warning to the citizens of this planet, but it was basically another of the numerous Illuminati blueprints and agendas for a future society, where through these constant low-intensity nuclear wars, the population would be kept low and a small elite, ruling elite, would run the whole world. I mean, these are the most frightening of the scenarios prepared by the most frightening of the numerous factions of the independent angels being on the planet, namely the factions that are very deep into the occult and black magic, which is disregard of individual freedom and total interference with the mind of the subject.
Well, a few moments ago, we talked about H.G. Wells. H.G. Wells also wrote another book at the turn of the century called The Time Machine. And in the movie The Time Machine, you should get that movie and rent it and watch it, because that is a real experience. The story shows how in the New World Order, all people are totally devoid of anything, emotions, no individuality. Everyone is totally controlled, and at a certain time of day, the buzzers go off, the sirens go off, and everyone stops what they're doing, and they go back up to the mountain, to the holy mountain, and there's just absolutely total control over all people.